Okay, if you were inspired by the launch of Turkey's first astronauts into space last month, here's another space mission to get excited about. It's an unmanned lunar vehicle, but it's racing to the moon as we speak. And if successful, it will be the first time that a private contractor has touched down on the lunar surface. The ultimate goal is to put people back on the moon within just a few years. TRT World's Andy Rosejohn takes a closer look.
Ignition and liftoff. Go SpaceX, go IM-1 and the Odysseus lunar lander.
The launch from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida last week was perfect. But will a private company be the first ever to stick the landing? This SpaceX rocket carried a lunar vehicle, the Odysseus, from a private company in Texas called Intuitive Machines. Odysseus, which is about the size of a golf cart with 6 legs, separated from the rocket and is sending back these images of Earth in its rearview mirror. It's scheduled to land on the moon on Thursday, near the moon's south pole. The goal? Finding a way to put humans back on the moon for a long time.
There are these permanently shadowed craters in the south polar region of the moon, and that's where NASA believes they will find frozen water. And that frozen water can be used both to support humans on the moon and then also to produce fuel. That could be used for the humans to either come back to Earth from the moon or to go on to another location like Mars.
The only time humans ever landed on the moon was this famous landing by the American Apollo mission in 1969. 4 other nations have made unmanned trips to the moon, but the last private company to try failed a few weeks ago. And landing there is still very difficult, especially for a remote-controlled lander.
As you know, the moon has a lot less gravity than the Earth does, but it also has no atmosphere, so there's very little to break your descent as you're falling to the surface. So that spacecraft has to know exactly when to turn on its engines and how much thrust to deploy and when to stop so that it can land softly on the moon without bouncing off the moon or crashing into the moon.
For years, NASA has been partnering with private space companies like the company Axiom Space, which sent up Turkey's very first astronaut last month. The partnerships are making space travel ultimately cheaper and more frequent. As for the solar-powered Odysseus, its mission ends in about a week when the sun won't be on the moon anymore. But if all goes as planned, it'll pave the way for humans to arrive there again in 2 or 3 years. Andy Rosejohn, TRT World.
OK, let's get more on this now from Per Wimmer, who joins me from London. He's undergone, as I understand, astronaut training himself. And, of course, he's a space advocate, very enthusiastic. Per, all of a sudden, seems like an awful lot of countries are interested in going into space, and particularly the moon. If I remember correctly, India landed a module there last year. We saw Japan do it this year. Now we've got a private company sending a lander there. If a private company's doing it, that says to me there's some money to be made. What are they looking for?
Absolutely. I mean, the wider context we should see here with this mission, which, by the way, is historic. I mean, it is an enormous feat, should they succeed, which we hope they will, landing successfully on the moon. It will be the first private mission to land on the moon. And it will also be the first time the Americans are back since the Apollo program. For the benefit of this program, I'm actually wearing an Apollo jacket here for the 50th anniversary to celebrate that connection, incidentally. But the context here is the wider use of private companies for space, including NASA giving out private contracts so that NASA can focus on what they would consider to be the more difficult research and development stuff and perhaps deeper space, and then outsourcing effectively and giving opportunities to private companies to be more involved in space. So in this particular instance, NASA gave out the contract for $77 million. Allow Intuitive Machines eventually to carry out this historic mission.
We just heard an expert there talking about, water on the moon. Now, but, what are they really looking for? Because there must be something tangible there, whether it's, developing some kind of base of operations, maybe some kind of minerals. I have no idea, but there must be something there they're particularly looking for.
Yeah, so this particular mission, IM-1, has 4 different things that they're really going to do. First and foremost, they're going to put equipment on the lunar surface that will allow for better navigation. So when we have further probes and eventually also hopefully astronauts coming up back to the moon, it'll be easier and better and more precise to measure the distance between the moon and any floating object outside the moon. So that navigation will be one thing. Secondly, there'll be a lot of lunar surface data that they'll be gathering, understanding the surface better, so it's easier to know what you're landing on. Thirdly, weather. It will also have capabilities to checking out the weather in and around the moon. So that will also be a part of it. And like we heard here, the South Pole is particularly interesting. Fourthly, regards to the water, because water is obviously a key part of life for human beings and for potential fuel from there. So that's why the attention is so much on the South Pole. But it is difficult to land on the South Pole, as we have seen with other missions. So it is very exciting, very difficult, but great to see that a private company now are carrying out this. And there will hopefully be more coming along those ways. I mean, we've seen Axiom putting a Turkish astronaut into space. We see Voyager Space, another great American company, looking to build an international space station potentially whilst they're carrying out work currently on the International Space Station. So a lot more coming here our way.
Space travel is something that really captures, everyone's imagination. Everyone loves to see the pictures of the rockets blasting off and the idea of going to somewhere like the moon. People find it very exciting. But the moon hasn't been anywhere since Neil Armstrong first walked on it. Why did mankind lose interest, it seems, in it for so long?
Well, historically, I mean, the Apollo 11, which is the jacket I'm wearing here, obviously was a fantastic, amazing experience. And they captured the whole world that man on the moon suddenly was there. And Neil Armstrong uttered the famous phrase, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But then as the missions went on, including Apollo 17, which was the last time that we went to the moon, people lost a little bit of interest. It became a little bit more day to day. But it seems like now there's a renewed interest in space. And some of that is fueled by all the private capital going into it, where we can see what we can do with all this private capital, exploration, learning more. So there's a bit of a new dawn of a new era here that we're seeing, and that captures the public interest, and not at least in Turkey, where we've seen the first Turkish astronaut into space. So that changes things. Capital changes a lot of things, and you do a lot with that. And on a personal note, I'm personally excited to go into space in a couple of years' time myself. That is exciting and carries a lot of inspirational capacity to youth out there, I think.
Well, best of luck for you for your journey. And before you go, just very, very quickly, do you think in our lifetime we'll see a base on the moon?
Yes, absolutely. We will see a base on the moon. It's technically feasible. It's just a matter of money, but the money is coming. So the answer is yes. We'll definitely have a moon base, and then we can go on from there. And hopefully, in our lifetime, we'll also see a mission to Mars with humans.
And Per, if you do go into space, please do come back and tell us all about it. I'd love to hear all about it. Per Wimmer's my guest. He's a budding astronaut and a space advocate. Thank you so much. Let's get a space, it's so Freudian, isn't it? A sports update with Kate Partridge.